Hey there, church. Sometimes I like to imagine that I'm living something like, 700, 800, 1,000 years ago. And the places I usually imagine this aren't, of course, sitting here on a modern deck looking into a smartphone camera. It's more when I'm walking in the woods or I close my eyes and listen to the wind running through the trees. And I think to myself, this is what life would have sounded like walking through the woods or just listening to the wind run through the trees at pretty much any point in geological history. And this gives me some comfort that there really is such stability, such solidity to the world. And that's easy for me to forget because, kind of like last night, as the worship committee was starting to have some Christmas Eve planning conversations, we were asking things about, well, what can we expect for how many families with kids might show up? Are we going to see a lot of people coming back to Christmas Eve, or are there some who kind of have fallen out of the pattern even of periodic attendance with church? There's so much that's unknown. The world is so unpredictable in so many ways. As we look to Reformation Sunday, this coming Sunday, I'm reminded of something the scholar Phyllis Tickle wrote about a few years back in a book called The Great Emergence, where she makes the claim that about every 500 years or so, there's a great big yard sale in the church, and it's like a whole bunch of stuff gets put out, thrown out in a time of great confusion, a great time of great upheaval. Yeah, it feels like we don't know what the center of things is anymore, and how things are going to shake out. But it's in those 500-year change periods that God is doing something especially dynamic. The Reformation was one of those periods. And of course, Martin Luther was a central, maybe the central figure in all of the Reformation. Martin Luther's theology calls us again and again to a deep humility before God, a kind of humility with each other. That's important for me to remember when I feel confused, when I'm not sure which way is up and how we are to live as the church these days. Let me give you an example. Speaking of Christmas coming up in a couple of months, Luther loved to preach, especially at Christmas. And so this is the end of a Christmas sermon where he has painted the picture of Jesus being born, and he's placed in the manger, and there are Mary and Joseph and the animals around the manger. So it's this wonderful, very intimate kind of scene. And Luther preaches, let us look for a moment at the spiritual significance. Mary is the figure of Christianity. That is, all Christians who wrap the newborn child in the word of the gospel. The swaddling clothes signify the preaching of the gospel. The manger signifies the place where Christians come together to hear the word of God. The ox and the ass stand for us. And I just love that. How Luther can paint this picture of magnificent grace and just bring us to the lowest spot there. The ox and the ass. I am the ass in this picture, and so often we feel like we should know where we need to go and figure out what we should do, but maybe what Reformation Sunday and Luther here, our preacher, is calling us to do is just to behold Christ in our midst. God among us, God coming without power, God coming in Jesus without any wisdom, God coming in Jesus, who as a baby had no idea how things were going to unfold and how life would go, and depended on us for care. And this is how God worked out salvation. So whatever you may feel is going on in the church, whether it's Christ Church or the church at large in these days, I think we can be encouraged that Christ is still among us. God is working a purpose out in the midst of whatever the yard sale is that's going on in the church right now. And the way we can continue to find our bearings, at least as Christ Church, is to focus our energies on loving God, sharing relationships, serving others from the heart of Christ.